Hi, this is Alex from devstories.eu. OpenAI and Swagger Ecosystem, Episode 6 of 19. Static endpoints only get you so far. To build a truly useful API, you need a way to pass dynamic arguments straight through the request to change how an operation executes or what data it targets. This episode is all about dynamic endpoints with parameters. Let us start with the URL path itself. In OpenAI, you define dynamic sections of a URL using path templating. You do this by wrapping a variable name in curly braces. Think of an e-commerce API. If you want to fetch a specific order, your path looks like /orders/open brace order ID close brace. Inside your OpenAI document, you describe this variable using a parameter object. You specify its location by setting the in field to the value path. People sometimes try to make path parameters optional. You cannot do this. A path parameter structurally defines the route. If the parameter is missing, the route simply does not exist. Because of this rule, any parameter where the location is path must always set the required field to true. What if you want optional modifiers? That brings us to the second location, where the in field equals query. Query parameters appear at the exact end of the URL, after a question mark. Returning to our e-commerce API, you might want a list of orders, but you only want to see the ones already in transit. You append $status equals shipped to the URL. Unlike path parameters, query parameters do not define the resource location. They filter or modify the result, which means their required field can be set to either true or false. The URL is not the only place to pass parameters. The parameter object supports two more locations. Setting the in field to header allows you to define custom HTTP headers expected by your operation. For example, you might require a custom header indicating a specific client device type. Note that standard headers like accept or authorization are strictly excluded from the parameter object because they are handled elsewhere in OpenAI. Finally, setting the location to cookie lets you document parameters passed via browser cookies, such as a temporary session token. Declaring where a parameter lives is only the first step. You also need to define its shape. Inside the parameter object, you use the schema field to define the underlying data type. This tells the API consumer exactly whether that order ID is an integer, a string, or a specific format like a UUID. Then you have the style field. This dictates how the parameter gets serialized into the HTTP request. Serialization matters deeply when you're passing complex data like arrays or objects. If you pass a list of statuses in a query string, the style field determines the format. A style value of form might separate multiple values by an ampersand, while a style value of simple outputs a comma-separated list. By combining the location, schema, and style fields, you give the client exact instructions on how to format the network request. Here's the key insight. The parameter object doesn't just describe inputs as a courtesy, it strictly dictates the exact footprint of what an operation accepts, enforcing data types and formats before a single line of your backend logic runs. If you're finding these episodes helpful, you can support the show by searching for DevStories EU on Patreon. That's all for this one. Thanks for listening and keep building.